Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Diaz and I'm presenting the feature story for FFQR-10. And this story was a front-end story. We wanted to generate a questionnaire ID block for the user to enter the ID that identifies the questionnaire they need to take, or to follow the direct link to that questionnaire with that ID. Include some error handling for invalid IDs or invalid links, as well as some rerouting back to the main page where a user needs to enter that ID. I also took the opportunity to create a basic component of a question block. So at the end of this story, we're able to see the basic flow for the questionnaire web app. This is the current application running. In this case, if a user were to enter an invalid questionnaire ID, we get a prompt saying that check the ID and try again, or contact the issuer. And if we put in a valid ID, in this case I'm mocking, this would normally hit our backend service to validate this ID, and with that ID we'll be able to send back the results of this questionnaire to the issuer that is kept with this ID. But in this case, valid 001 is a valid ID that's being mocked in the service. I'll show later. Begin questionnaire, and we just have a basic title, an intro text block that has basic instructions for the questionnaire, and this is just a basic question block with no other options except frequency and frequency type. So here it highlights I can enter it manually, or I can trigger this way. If I come out and I just come here, it will only allow me to do positive numbers, so 1 and above. Frequency type is just day of week or day. So in this case, 1 time per day, 1 time per week. And that's basically it. Now, if we go back to the home page, a user can also follow a link given to them by the questionnaire and by the issuer, or through an email. In this case, valid. So that was the questionnaire ID that was valid. If we follow this link directly, it'll take us to the questionnaire. And if I go back and I enter the wrong ID, pop-up will come up, questionnaire not found, please check the link and try again, or contact the issuer. In this case, I'm brought back to this page, which is the main page to input. To go over the code changes, I thought it'd be easier to look at the pull request. In this case, this is the first major merge to master for the front end. I restructured the application directories to include a directory for reusable components. In this case, it's an error dialog pop-up, the question block, and this text card. The pop-up is basically a material dialog with a title, message, and an OK button. I basically feed it what I want in the inputs, and this can be seen on one of the pages. So in this case, I validate questionnaire ID. If the questionnaire validator service determines that ID is valid, I'm going to go ahead and route to the questionnaire plus that ID. But if it's invalid, I'm going to open this error dialog component, which is this, and then I feed it the title that I want and the message that I want. And I again use that same component in the questionnaire page. Here on init, I'm going to grab the ID from the route parameters and then pass it to this validator service. Basically, I assign the IDs to questionnaire ID so I can actually keep it later for submission. And then I validate it. and this will give me if this ID is valid or not. And then if that ID is valid or not, the HTML is going to render conditionally based on what's the return of this function. So validate questionnaire ID. Validate questionnaire ID will return if it's valid or not, but it also does some additional handling in here. If it's not and the display dialog has not already happened, this gets called a couple times, so the second boolean is required to make sure it only renders once. And here I feed it a new title. The question block is still in its early stages. I'm not going to go too much into it because it wasn't really part of this story, but I just wanted to render a block on the screen and it have something to work with. But right now, basically, just has the frequency type which it pulls from and an input name. But the idea is it's going to have various inputs, and based on these inputs, it'll render different question blocks. This text card is just a basic card that I use for the instructions. It's going to print the main message, a title for the instructions, and a bulleted list, which is an array of strings. And this is just a basic component. We pass in these parameters, and that is also used from the question page here. Here I statically assign the values that I want for this page: title, main message, instructions title, and bulleted instructions, which is just an array. And then in the HTML, I call the text card and assign it these values. Same thing with question block. Here I'm just passing in breast milk as a name and it renders it accordingly. I can pass it in something else and it'll work. And that's pretty much to not go into too much detail, but I just wanted to outline some of the code changes. It was a lot in this one since it was the first one. And the rest is just basic stylings and imports. But these are the main items. The question input basically will validate it with the service. Oh, this is important to show. So I also have a services directory, which right now I only have a questionnaire validator. But I'll have some additional services like the food, like one to pull the food items and one to calculate. So here, right now is just basically a static method that is just making sure that if it's valid 001, it's considered valid. If not, it's not. But this will be a RESTful API call to the food frequency item service. And that's it. Thank you.